this is our school garden at Central, and this is actually last year's garden. This year, I was not able to get on campus until May, so our garden has a late start, but the squash is coming in very nicely, and hopefully we're ahead of the vine stem borers, although I did smash one this morning, so they're kind of the bane of my existence. But this is our setup. We have arched livestock panels over the beds to keep the kids and the footballs out of the vegetables. And it's also a safety setup, because that way the kids kind of bounce off the livestock panels and not the corners of the garden beds. And it worked out pretty well. So we've added 4 beds this year and have a total of 14 raised beds. Okay, next slide. So I've written grants for a technology development company, and the thing with writing a grant is you need a good story to tell, and everybody's got a good story. It's just the perspective that you need to develop to create that good story. And Central has both Latinx and Marshallese students there, and when I was at the alternative school, I had the majority Latinx and Marshallese students, and realized that these students' families often buy groceries that are cheap and bulky, but they're usually high in salt and calories. And so that really motivated my interest in getting a garden program going there. And at Central, we have the most amazing cafeteria, and the selection is very broad, but what the students actually choose is pretty narrow. And that's in spite of this wonderful variety of menu items. So we're in Northwest Arkansas, for those of you who don't know. Well, we're Springdale Public Schools, and that my agri curriculum includes gardening and food production through the whole semester, both fall and spring, for 8th grade. And then for 9th grade, it's an entire year that we keep circling back to the garden and to food production. And some projects that we already had underway were composting the cafeteria waste. The ladies put it in a bucket for us and the kids go get it. And the kids last year did a PSA campaign to get the other students to only take what they'd eat. We did some cafeteria food waste audits, and we've got a biogas generation project that's on hold. And we also plan on celebrating Harvest of the Month each month, although when I spoke to the manager of the cafeteria this morning, she said that the Harvest of the Month may be put on hold for a little while. So anyway, these were the things that were already going on that I was able to link to this potential grant. And an observation that I also linked to this potential grant was that it's possible to change food preference. I didn't think it was. I really honestly would have bet that you couldn't change food preference. But what happened to tell me otherwise was when the garden started producing, my kids would practically knock each other down to get out the door at the back of the room and get to the garden to pick the food, because their favorite thing to do in class was to bring that food back in, wash it, cut it up, and share it with each other. And the kids also took some food home, and many of the items that they were taking home had never been consumed in the home. And when the kids would come back, they would ask to be able to take more of this produce home. So that became a staple of my grant application. The work plan was broken down into 4 components. I had a school garden production to supply produce. And then a Farming 101 education component so that my increasingly urban kids who've never even seen a cow in person could actually have some experiences with farms and farming. And then student nutrition literacy, which ties directly to what the USDA Farm to School grant is all about. And then lastly, school cafeterias get a bum rap. And I'm not sure about other cafeterias, but the one at Central is incredible. I cannot believe that you can actually get food like that in a cafeteria, because when I was at school, the cafeteria served these hockey pucks for hamburgers and French fries, and then some unrecognizable mash for the other items that you could get. So our cafeteria really gets 5 stars, and I want to connect the kids to the cafeteria because I think that they need to take more advantage of it. So this comprised the work plan for the grant. So the garden component is, to me, the most fun one, because it allows me to take kids outside and get them understanding how to raise their own food. And what this also, I hope, will do, will enable us to provide fresh food for our snack pack program. Now, our current snack pack program doesn't give the kids enough food really for the weekend, and it's not great nutritional food. It'll last for sure, but it's not great nutritional selection. So what I explained in the grant was that we could optimize productivity out in our garden by doing the things that I've put on the slide here. Most importantly, what we really need to do is we need to physically upgrade the beds for starters. And an additional component was to purchase some hydroponic tower gardens, which would build in the agility needed for getting vegetables during the winter. Although there will be the capability to build some cold frames, and I've had success overwintering vegetables. So I anticipate that with some cold frames, I'll be able to do 4 seasons worth of production. And if we are successful in really upping our production, the Springdale School Cafeteria Program will actually purchase our surplus vegetables. So in the before times, the plan was really to get the kids out there, to take them to the local nonprofit community gardens and to have them help at those gardens, and to be able to actually invite farmers to our classrooms and then go to the farms and to these local nonprofits. And I'm also in communication with some of the folks at the University of Arkansas, and we were planning on being able to take the kids there, but that remains to be seen. So our partners include the University of Arkansas faculty and extension service agents, and then a young woman named Anna Fisher, who is at the UAMS, and she's a project coordinator with the community health and research part of the UAMS. And then also part of this grant was to have students develop some contacts and work with experts directly themselves to create a comprehensive gardening approach. Now, when I set out to write this grant, I started with partners in mind, which I think is a really important thing to do when you apply for a grant, especially a USDA grant. You need to start out with some idea of who will partner with you. And then another component was of the Farming 101 was summer camps. And of course that didn't happen this summer, but hopefully in June we'll be able to do 2 one-week sessions to rising 8th graders, and our 9th graders will be invited to be our staff. And the focus of these camps will be how to raise and maintain a garden. And one of the things that I've done with my kids in the past has been to build things like sculptures from recyclables. And in conjunction with Boston Mountain Recycling, I planned on gathering containers throughout the year of recyclables that the kids could actually then create some sort of container garden and be able to take it home. And they also will learn how to navigate the UA Extension Service site to support their efforts. Now, one of the things that's really important for a grant like this one is that you can demonstrate what you're proposing can be done even if they don't fund you. That's attractive. When reviewers look at what you have written, if they can see that you would be able to do parts of this anyway and will do parts of this anyway, that helps you get points for your, I guess points should be figurative there, but it helps you it helps you in your standing. So the modified version is that we will try to get our camps in next summer. And then the Farming 101 classroom aspect would have been to get as many farmers as we could find into our classroom and hopefully visit their farms. I know that some of the nonprofit community farms are still not having any volunteers and are trying to keep things going with just their own people. I don't know if that will change anytime soon here. So that remains to be seen. Our field trips probably are going to be mostly virtual, but I have 9th graders all year, so I'm hoping to give them some elements of agribusiness. And again, if you look at these things, all of these things are doable without much money. Now, the money will make it easier, and it will extend what a person could do. But again, I just want to emphasize that these are things that don't necessarily require a grant. Okay, AgriDay has been a very big deal for us the last 2 years. And this year, the plan was to do an AgriDay and then in spring to host a showcase that would essentially have all the people who were interested, who participated in the farmers markets, come with their produce, if they had some, but also with their, with information about their own farms and how they got started in producing food for the farmers market. So the AgriDay, I hope, will be a virtual endeavor. Student nutrition literacy is hugely important in Springdale. Our Marshallese and Latinx communities really suffer from the results of poor diets. And by teaching the kids, they take it home. And I've seen this at Archer, which is our alternative high school. And then I saw it with the garden at Central. And it's hard to change adults' food preferences, but it's possible if you do it through the students. And so we had hoped to do a series of events where the kids would cook and where they would learn from a UAMS dietitian. There are Hispanic dietitians at UAMS who are planning on working with us if we're able to do this component. And I think we may actually have a Marshallese chef who is willing to work with us. And the thought is that we may still be able to do something virtually, but this was to culminate in a couple of events where the kids would cook dinners for their parents and try to introduce new foods and create that acceptance of a broader variety. And really, we want to change the kids' habits, but we want them to take those changes home and to make eating at their households healthier. The last component was a social media component. And again, this really was to highlight the cafeteria and to teach the kids to look at the cafeteria with a consumer mindset. And the students go in there and they go right over to the chicken nuggets, or they go right over to the pizza, and they grab what they have eaten for the last 65 weeks of their school. And so by creating this component, not only would the students who are working on it start to look at the food in the cafeteria a little differently, they would also influence their peers to look at food a little differently and maybe go in there with the shopper mentality of, okay, I paid for this lunch. What can I eat today? What can I eat that's more interesting and different? So that's the hope. The components that go with it include a student campaign to reduce food waste and a picture menu that the students will create so that the other kids know what's available before they go in there. And then the kids who are creating the student menus will also include nutritional information, which will teach the students creating the menus a lot about different food items. And then lastly, we want to do a graphic to highlight the harvest of the month, which features local produce. So I started with this year with these two grants. One of them, the USDA grant, and then the second one, the grant for growing from FFA. And you can apply for funding for 3 different aspects, one of which is a classroom component. So this funding would increase the students' basic knowledge through classroom presentation of agriculture. Or you can grow your FFA chapter or grow ag awareness. And I chose to combine the FFA chapter and ag awareness. It's hard to create a strong junior high ag program, or at least it's challenging. Springdale is increasingly urban, and so we don't get a whole lot of kids who are coming from even a small farm. And so there's not that prior interest in agriculture. The solution to that is to reach out to the younger students, and junior high kids love to teach younger kids. They love to do that. And so the plan was to use the junior high students as ambassadors to our middle school kids and take some experiences and opportunities to the middle school kids. And in part, what we were going to do was we were going to travel over there or have them come over to Central and have several events, one of which would have featured livestock. And I don't know that we'll be able to do the livestock part, but I'm working on the way that my kids can still go to the middle school and help the students at the middle schools build bucket gardens and portable composting bins. So we're still working on that. And if we do an after-school event, we're probably going to have to figure out how to either do it outside or do it virtually. So in receiving these grants, the Central Ag program was really blessed, but we're also going to be really challenged to figure out how to do this in the era of COVID. One thing that a lot of my kids have in common, even though they're not from farms, is they still are interested in things like fishing and camping. And so we're going to combine some forestry with visits by Fish and Game personnel. And once again, these will probably have to be virtual because we can't put all that many kids on a bus for a field trip. And I don't think at this point Springdale is planning on doing field trips. But we're also going to get some land surveying equipment and teach the kids how to do a survey. And the other thing that we can still do is we're going to create some brochures and materials that help parents and students understand the scope of agriculture and potential careers, because most of my students think of careers in agriculture as either landscaping work or jobs at the poultry processing plant. And that perception needs to change. And this is our garden pest control. We have quite a few of these out at the garden. This was a beautiful little garter snake, and she didn't much like me in her garden, but I had to move her because the football coach needed to get some equipment. So does anybody have any questions?
Kathy, just remind us real quick, when was it that you applied for the USDA Farm to School grant and then also the FFA grant? Okay. And how long did you take writing those grants?
Okay, so the USDA grant deadline was December 12th, 2019. And it took me, well, I have a pretty considerable experience in writing grants. So I think it took me about 2 weeks. Of course, I've been thinking about that for a long time, and there were a lot of moving parts that I had to put into place with various people at Central. The child nutrition director had to be brought into this, and of course I had to talk to the school maintenance head and let him know that I really wasn't planning on digging up the back 40 and, you know, putting a barn out there, that kind of thing. And then the FFA grant, that one is really streamlined. It's funded by Tractor Supply, and it's just it's a short form that you fill out. So that one I'd been thinking about for considerable length of time, but it probably took me about 2 hours to actually complete the form. And it's really important to start with a compelling story that you can demonstrate you're already doing components of it, and that, you know, you'll continue with your plans even if you don't get funding. And I think it's demonstrating the determination to go ahead with or without the funding that really, it really matters.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing a little bit more about that. And so I'm going to introduce Jason Kaufman, who is an education coordinator at Arkansas Farm Bureau, to talk about a little bit more about what Farm Bureau does in Arkansas. But so the specific work that Jason does at Arkansas Farm Bureau is help provide agriculture awareness programs to schools and communities around the state, supporting a statewide garden grant program, and also supports Economic Arkansas, FFA, and 4-H activities. Jason grew up on a farm and enjoys educating people on the importance of agriculture and supporting other groups that do the same. Jason, I'm excited for you to share a little bit more about Arkansas Farm Bureau with all of us.
All right. Well, thank all of y'all for attending today. And yeah, everything that I'm going to talk about today is listed on that website, arfb.com. And if you click on the education tab, you can find the garden grant information. You can find, we've got lots of teacher resources that are basically free. So I know, Kathy, this might be something you can use. We also have different teacher awards and resources that you might be available to, or you might be interested in as well. So what we do at Farm Bureau is we talk a lot about, we do a lot of traveling programs where we talk about agriculture. We talk about its impact on food security, on our state's economy, and also on employment in the state. So I talk about, Kathy brought up bringing in people to talk about kind of the business side of it and career side of it. That's something that myself and Matt, my coworker, we're on the road about 4 or 5 days a week sometime doing programs around the state. So garden grants is what I'm going to talk about today, but that's a real small part of what we spend our time doing. But anyways, all that is listed on the website if you want to go there. So to talk about our garden grants, we do have about $6,000 a year allocated to go to garden grants. A new garden, you can get around $500. You can get $500 for a new garden. For an existing garden, that you can get $250 for those. This past year, we had about 8 recipients. So we did have some unused funds that could have gone out to schools. We just didn't have enough people that applied. I've talked to quite a few groups about them this year, so I bet that we will have definitely our 6,000, and we'll see what happens beyond that. But I would definitely guess that we would have 12 applicants this year. So criteria is it's got to go to a school, an FFA chapter, or a 4-H club. We do recommend you have a minimum of 100 students for average daily attendance. So basically, if we help build a garden at your school, we're going to want more than just one teacher involved. We're going to want you to involve other classes generally so that you meet that 100 students. We're not going to go in and build 12 gardens for every teacher in the school. It needs to be more focused, more involved, and more of a partnership than that. So anyways, that's just kind of how that 100 students number is broken down. So the garden must be located on or adjacent to the school site. You need to have a farmer volunteer, preferably a county farm bureau board member, must also serve as a project advisor. Mainly if somebody hasn't been involved in growing things, we want you to have some experienced people. And most people think of Farm Bureau as insurance, but it actually started out as a nonprofit. And we're run on a county level and also on a state level. The decisions that are made in those county offices and for our state program are all made by farmers and people in the community. So most people just think we're insurance, but there's a lot of experience on our county boards and people that volunteer and help do the programs that I'm involved with. We've got all kinds of people in agriculture that are involved with running our county and our state organizations. So if you're looking, one of the requirements is that you've got to have some outside funding. The County Farm Bureau Board is a great place to look for that extra funding. A lot of my applications, probably half, I would say, the County Farm Bureau Board is who is helping meet that extra funding requirement. So teacher involvement, of course, is mandatory, and parental involvement is recommended. The gardens must contain an agriculture crop such as corn, wheat, rice, soybeans, or it could contain vegetables and fruit. Livestock projects are also acceptable. It's not for flower gardens, it's not for butterfly gardens or nature trails. those are nice projects, but what we're trying to teach is, what we're trying to make the connection to is how your food is grown, and that. So I spend 4 or 5 days a week on the road, and I hear all the time how your food just comes from Walmart or Kroger or Harps. So that's why we're trying to help kids make the connection of how their food is actually grown, and take away some of the misunderstanding that people have that the food just shows up magically, and it's always going to be there. So a report on the garden must be submitted, including pictures or video at the end of the project, the growing season, or the school year. All of our applications this year, I got them out, I think, by the middle of March. So about the time COVID hit. So I got lots of messages from teachers that said, hey, as soon as we got all the supplies, basically we all got sent home. So this year, obviously, just like in every other way, this year is a little bit different. So, but that's the general rule. Applications will be accepted November 1st through February 15th, as long as funding is available. So the reason for that, at Farm Bureau, our calendar year ends October 31st. So November 1st is a new year for us and goes through February 15th. The reason for that, I try to deliver all those checks in person, and March, April, May, I'm slammed on the road doing programs in schools. Once kids are done with their standardized testing, that's when we get invited to do a lot of our ag days and stuff like that. So March, April, and May for me, for the most part, I'm usually booked up 3 or 4 months in advance doing programs around the state, and so is my coworker. These are matching fund grants, like I already talked about. You have to have matching funds of some kind. It can either be money, it can be materials, it can be labor, it can be use of equipment. So again, going to your local farm bureaus, a lot of times they're more than happy to help. Sometimes people go like to a greenhouse that's in their community. Those are probably the 2 most known matches that I've found, or that I've seen this year. And again, up to $500 will be awarded for a new garden, and up to $250 will be awarded if you've got an ongoing garden project. This year, out of my 8 applications, I think 7 of them were new gardens and 1 of them was an ongoing garden. So just to give people an idea. But if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. But again, all that is listed on our website at arfb.com. And if you want to find my email, it is, if you go under the contact us link on that website, it'll have, you can go and find Jason Kaufman. But my email is jason.kaufman@arfb.com. And I'll be happy to help you in any way that I can.
Thank you, Jason, so much for sharing a little bit more about Arkansas Farm Bureau, all the work that you do, and also these garden grants. Would you maybe put your chat in the chat box? Would you put your email in there, Jason, so that people could copy it real easily?
And thank you for the invite, Sarah.
Oh, yeah. Any questions for Jason on Arkansas Farm Bureau? I am going to very quickly talk about one final grant. And I will mention that we have created, as part of our Farm to School program, we've created a 3-page document that lists a bunch of other garden grants beyond just the ones that you're hearing today that we will send out in the recap email. But we wanted to have this time to highlight a few of the major ones in our state. So we're so thankful for Kathy and Jason for joining on. I'm Sarah Lane, the first Farm to School and Early Childhood Education Program Coordinator. I served with Food Corps, which I saw some Food Corps people on the line, and some other AmeriCorps members, so really thankful that you are here. And that's really when I found this love for gardening and Farm to School and connecting with farmers. I got my master's in teaching and started teaching then at a nature preschool in Little Rock before starting this position. So I want to talk today in the next 3 minutes about the Arkansas Grown School Garden of the Year contest. We're in our 7th year. So this started in 2014, and it's a partnership between The Arkansas Agriculture Department is what the name used to be before our department changed to the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. So it's a partnership between us and Farm Credit. And back in 2014, this was open to Arkansas schools that were grades pre-K through 12. And there were 4 categories, as you see here, on nutrition education, community collaboration, environmental education, and then an overall winner. The funding is provided from Farm Credit. And I've linked here a map that I created of where you can see of all the schools who have received funding and have won this contest since 2014. So we have a range of them in Central Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, as well as one coming in from Northeast Arkansas. So we would love to see some applications come in from the South. So if you happen to be a school in the South, we are looking forward to your applications. Last year, because since 2014, there's been some changes with the program. There was an additional category added for a startup garden because we realized that there were many schools who hadn't started a garden and needed funding to do that. So we had added this 5th category of the best school garden startup proposal. And you can see in the image here our winners from last year. We had Pikeview Early Childhood Education Center. And this is also something to note that since 2014 to where we are now, we have expanded the definition of what a school is. It's not just a pre-K through 12 setting for us now, it's also our early care facilities as well as our alternative learning environments like juvenile detention centers. So we had Pikeview Early Childhood Center as the winner, Marshall Elementary, Forest Park Elementary, Sheridan Intermediate, and Springdale High School. And so that brings us to 2020, where we are this year, where we're excited to announce that we also have a new category this year. It's called the Champion of Sustaining School Gardens, because since 2014, we have seen some of our winners continue to work on their school gardens and continue to have programming. To make the funding available to other schools who have never won the contest before, we made this new category. So if a school has applied in the past and received funding as a winner of the contest, they will now be eligible just for the one category of Champion of Sustaining School Gardens, which opens up the other 5 categories for us to be awarding new schools across the state. And we're really excited about that addition. The contest runs through Sunday, September 13th, 2020. So if you haven't yet, we definitely encourage you to apply for this contest. And I can put the link in the chat box and also send it out in the recap email. So that is one of the other ways that we help support school gardens in the state. We will have some additional funding coming down the line, which we are excited to announce more about at the end of September. So stay tuned for some additional school garden grant funds. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to pause, stop sharing, and open it up for questions in our next 3 minutes. I know that that was a lot of great information we had Kathy Hall talking about the USDA Farm to School grant, as well as FFA grants. And then we had Jason talking about Arkansas Farm Bureau. And lastly, as I talked about the school garden contest. So what questions have come up from all of you about applying for grants and funding, or where else to find funding in the state? We would love to hear those. Feel free to unmute yourself or add them in the chat. I will also at this time open a poll up. So you'll see that pop up on your screen, which will help us know what else you'll be interested in learning more about.
I have a question for Kathy. You were talking about the narrative of the grant proposal, and I guess my question is, how much of that is sort of an appeal to tell the story, and then how much of it is also like statistics and like showing the needs of the school or the area, whether it's like the percentage of students on free and reduced or other things that show like the way that a garden would benefit the school as a whole?
I think in the case of this particular grant, I would give it 50% to each one. Central is probably a little more advantaged than some of the other schools, but Springdale has over 70% of free and reduced lunches district-wide. Central is set in kind of an area where I would say that our students are better off than some of the other schools. And so for the USDA, there are some requirements that you have to meet. And I believe that you have to meet, I hope I've got this right. I believe that you have to have 50% free and reduced lunch. And I could be wrong about that, but it seems to me like that was an important consideration. And then demonstrating a demographic that would benefit from the nutritional information and education is important. Of course, you can do that in just any school. I don't think that nutritional literacy is all that high for the most part, especially if you're talking about a junior high. But coming up with a compelling case is also important. And having written grants in the past, I'm convinced that it's always possible to come up with a compelling story. So you need to make your story fit what the grant solicitation is asking for. Now, sometimes you can't. Sometimes the story that you have doesn't fit the particular grant solicitation. But with respect to the farm to school grant application, I think that every school could probably find a way to come at this grant and present a proposal that would be viewed favorably. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
We also had a question in the chat from Diana Bowen asking about Whole Food Foundation grants. And so yes, Whole Kids Foundation is actually what the foundation is called. They have garden grants of up to $3,000. It opens in February, and then I just looked online. They will notify applicants on August 2nd, so we're kind of like a year out from receiving those. We have had some previous applicants in Arkansas. A school that comes to mind immediately was Marshall Elementary. I don't know if there's others on the line who are from schools who have received these grants. And your follow-up question about organic foods, Diana, are you meaning like using the funds to purchase organic foods or growing organic foods? Don't know if you can maybe unmute yourself or put it in the chat. What I've known of the Whole Kids Foundation grants is that it's mainly for supplies for growing foods. So I don't believe that they have to be organic. Yeah, Reed, if you want to unmute yourself and share about that, that would be great too.
We got one, I guess it was 2019, applied 2018, got it for 19, and it was specifically to go to supplies, but they were pretty lenient with that. We told them we wanted to build like a compost system, and then they were like, okay, that's great. And then the PTA was like, let's not do that. We want to build a high tunnel instead. And so we contacted them and said, the plans changed. And they said, that's fine. Just, whenever we send out the report for you to fill out, you'll kind of just need to tell us like what you set out to do, what changed, why it changed, and just kind of keep them posted on it. And it was specifically for supplies. I know they have another one that's for salad bars and cafeterias, but they worked with us, on a couple of different ideas, and we just essentially said that we're trying to expand our garden program, and we'd really like to build nice, like buy some lumber to build compost piles because we've been using pallets, which are fine. But we, the PTA really wants it to look really nice. And then that changed. So the reporting is pretty simple as well if you do get the grant. So there's kind of somebody like a liaison to help you answer any questions as you move along.
Thanks, Reed, for giving that update for us. That was really helpful. I appreciate that you were on the line to share that.
Sure.
I did add in the chat for everyone the link where you can find that information. And I will mention that they also have a bee program that you can apply for school bees. So that's one that they've had in the past as well. Any other final questions? I want to be very mindful of that we have stolen 5 extra minutes of all of your time. And I appreciate many of you for staying on the line. If there are any other final questions, feel free to unmute yourself or add it in the chat. And know that I will be sending a follow-up recap email with slideshow, as well as a link to this recording and that document that lists other grants that you might want to apply for, as well as it has a little description and a link so that you can start working on some grants. All right. Well, if you have a question, I'll stay on the line, but we're so thankful to all of you for joining. Thank you again to Jason and Kathy for speaking today. And thank you for everyone who is here for joining. We really appreciate it. And we will catch you at the next Farm to School Network conversation.
Sarah, I'd like to make the offer that if anybody wants help thinking about a grant, that I'm happy to help with that.
That's awesome. That's incredible.
Would
you like me to put that in the recap email to everyone?
Sure, you can.
Okay.
I know of a lot of garden grants. I've gotten an ISEP grant. I've gotten, I don't know, I can't remember all of the grants that I've gotten, but I'm somewhere up around probably $60,000 in nickel and dime grants. So,
yeah,
in a classroom, $5,000 is riches, So I'm happy to help people think about how they could frame their information to make a compelling case.
That is so kind of you. And I am sure some people will take you up on that. So thank you for being willing to offer that. You have had so much experience. It's great to hear that it's been almost $60,000 in grant funding. That is impressive. I've also heard of the ISEP grants, Game and Fish. When I send out the recap email, I'd love if you'd look over the document we have of our grants that we've compiled. And if you know of any others that we don't have listed there, let me know and I'd love to update it as well. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Any other final questions from those of you who are still on the line? If not, I'm going to end the conversation.